You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Justice Served here on Black Hollywood Live. My name is Phil Svitek. You guys know me. I brought my lawyer, Chelsea Galicia.
Hi there. Glad to have you again today.
Not legally my legal lawyer.
Right. Especially between the hours of 11 p.m. and 8 a.m. Don't call me.
That only applies to me. That doesn't apply to you at home.
Okay. Well, no, God, I hate when people when I first meet somebody and they find out that I'm a lawyer, their eyes light up like I'm going to come bail them out in the middle of the night, and I'm like, no.
Well, that's why they listen. Whoa! This is why they listen to the show. They like it.
Exactly.
Okay,
All right. Good.
We've got a lot to talk about besides Chelsea's rants on not
bailing people out in the middle of the night.
There you go. The University of Cincinnati police officer already indicted just 10 days after, so we'll talk about that. We have another movie theater with a gunman. This just kind of keeps continuing. We've got Dylan Roof indicted. Obviously, what happened in Charleston.
Yep.
So we'll talk about that. And then Bobbi Kristina. There's reports that there's a killer involved. So we'll tell you who's getting the blame for that one. And then something a little bit not quite lighthearted, but
as lighthearted as the stories get on today's show.
That's right. We'll talk about Snoop Dogg
and his problems in Sweden.
So, all right, let's start with our biggest story of today. This is breaking news. This came out a couple hours ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So this happened so fast that we almost didn't even have time to cover it on the show. Usually we cover a shooting and we cover the protest and then months later maybe an indictment. But this indictment today came down for murder against the University of Cincinnati police officer named Ray Tenzing, who just 10 days ago, July 19th, shot and killed a man that he had pulled over. The victim's name is Samuel DuBose, and the officer was wearing a body cam. When he pulled over this guy for an expired tag or something of that nature, the victim was cooperative. He seemed a little bit evasive about whether he had his license on him or not, but nothing that warranted him getting shot in the head, nothing that warranted the police officer fearing for his safety. Actually, when the officer reported what happened, he tried to claim that he had been dragged by the car down the street and had to shoot in order to somehow be let go from the car.
He's really out of the DA's office right off the bat. They're refuting that this is just preposterous. His story was completely made up, and that the video wasn't invaluable. And so, I'm glad they're using this evidence, and that obviously it is quite shocking that it is that fast and can be that fast, but
the indictment from the
indictment exactly. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, I'm glad with why spend more time on it than needs to be from a legal perspective. In the now, let's worry about the sentencing.
Well, yeah, this is great progress because there is the quote, and I'm not sure if it's Martin Luther King Jr. who said it, but justice delayed is justice denied. I could be making up who said that, but the point is that there is a sense of justice when things occur, not necessarily quickly, but they move at a reasonable pace, and this did move quickly. It was a lot easier than a lot of other investigations because the body camera was so clear about what happened. So we do know that body cams are invaluable, and hope that police departments across the country start using them. Here
Can I wear a body cam? Just that, like, if I wore my own body cam and be like, hey,
We might
listen.
catch you doing and say inappropriate things, so I don't know. I
No,
wouldn't
I'm
say
just
that.
saying, in the sense of, if I got pulled over, just humor me, because maybe there is a discussion there. If I wore a body cam, or at the very least, if I got on my phone and started filming our interaction,
You're
would that
technically-
be considered?
You're technically legally allowed to record as long as it's not impeding in an investigation or something of that nature. So, that's something that we've talked a lot about in protesting. You're allowed to videotape your interaction with police. When you're witnessing a crime, you're allowed to record, even though you may be told, put that down or don't record. As far as I know, in every jurisdiction you're allowed to. That may be incorrect, but as far as I know, there is no place where it is illegal to record interaction with the police officer unless it impedes an investigation, or I'm sure there's an exception for safety somewhere. But I don't see how recording somebody will make it unsafe, let's say, for the officer. So
Do that, people. Start that.
So sure, go. You may want to if you have that concern, but it is impressive that the Cincinnati prosecutor moved so quickly. He was actually very, very emotional in the press conference today when he announced the indictment for murder, saying that this killing was senseless, that this guy never should have been a police officer. The guy was a young guy, Officer Tensing, about 25 years old, I believe. The prosecutor called it the most asinine act I've ever seen a police officer make, totally unwarranted. And I think some people are going to be like, well, finally people are believing us, because there have been, a lot of people who have known that this kind of thing happened in the police departments where they lied about what happened to explain a shooting. In fact, there was another officer who lied in the police report to help support this officer. And so we can see that this loyalty among police officers is very strong. And so we have to be really careful to rely on one police officer's word when it's a police officer versus a civilian.
Well, even so, don't they say, I don't know, this is from Memento, so I don't know how accurate it actually is, but they say, eyewitness accounts are the least viable piece of information in sort of, as evidence.
Yeah, I have heard that too, and there have been studies that show that. But in this case, it's not just, was a police officer an eyewitness? And if an officer is a witness, hopefully they're trained to be a good witness. But the problem is that when giving a statement, a police officer in that moment seems to be choosing loyalty to their fellow officer rather than telling the truth, at least in this case and perhaps in others. So if convicted, this officer will go to prison for life. And I can't imagine that any juror who sees the body cam video will be able to find that this was not murder. I mean, the guy didn't do anything, didn't even reach out to him. So the guy couldn't even pretend, the officer couldn't pretend to say, oh, he was reaching for my gun. Nothing. And it was just crystal clear. The prosecutor was just so sad and beside himself. I hope that this not only supports the idea of body cams, but maybe there should be psychological testing for police officers. When somebody says that this guy should have never been a police officer, was there a way to psychiatrically test for his this kind of behavior, that this seemed in line with perhaps a personality disorder? I don't know what you think of that. Should every officer, either at the beginning or every couple of years? Here's where you get
into that. I don't know. This might be me stepping out of line. I don't even know if it's true or not, but if that was the case, then it just becomes one of those things where if you hire this officer, then he, does he go back and sue you for unjustly firing him because of mental conditions and so on and so forth?
That's a good point. And it should be a requirement, kind of like we are required to renew our driver's licenses, and we have the privilege to drive, and officers have a privilege to serve in this capacity. And if somebody is not fit to be a police officer in the field, perhaps they can work a desk job where they're not interacting with the public. But perhaps what this case should stand for is a notion that police officers who interact with the public should be perhaps regularly tested. I mean, maybe for their own benefit. Maybe they're seeing things, they're experiencing things that are damaging to them, and that they need treatment and attention to help get them better. Or perhaps, it was in this guy's personality. There are such things as personality disorders that psychologists and psychiatrists can test for and treat. I don't know if a personality disorder is treatable, but they can find them through testing. So it wouldn't be impossible. It's not like there aren't tests that don't exist that could find something like this. I wonder if this could have been discoverable before he was hired. But at least the good news is that if there is any good news in a tragic case like this, is that the officer is moving along towards justice at a reasonable pace.
I would say that's a very reasonable. That's a very reasonable rate.
Yeah.
All right. So at the top, I mentioned another movie theater shooting.
Yeah.
This one out of Lafayette, Louisiana, the fourth biggest city in Louisiana.
Wow, I did not know that. Yeah, this is another tragedy. A mentally ill 59-year-old man named John Hauser stood up after about 20 minutes into the movie Trainwreck and opened fire, killing 2 women and injuring 9 other people. He was somebody who was known to his family and the community as being basically a wacky guy. He even scared his own family.
Is he from the community? Because I know there was some reports that came out. There was debate of, he was actually out of state.
Yeah, he was. You're right. He scared people in his own community. Yeah, and he chose this community for reasons that I have not found. But he, appears hatred for African Americans, Jews, gays. He was someone who flew the Confederate flag and passed doomsday flyers around his neighborhood and expressed admiration for Adolf Hitler. So, not the friendliest, not a social guy. In fact, in 2008, there was a court order in Georgia that sent him to a mental health facility due to his volatile mental state. And one would think that if they've been ordered to a mental health facility, that he never should have been able to legally purchase a gun, which at this point it was found he did legally purchase a gun. But the reason why is because the federal law only states that somebody who is involuntarily ordered to a mental facility can't purchase a gun. And this guy was ordered, but either it didn't go through or he voluntarily went along with it, so it didn't trigger this federal warning that he does not qualify to purchase a gun. So it seems to me that more gun control would be reasonable,
beneficial.
Although I know there's a lot of people that keep coming back and saying, Second Amendment, Second Amendment, Second Amendment. And those people don't seem to understand that the Second Amendment includes the phrase well-regulated militia. So it doesn't say everyone without question has a right to bear arms. It is for the purposes of a well-regulated militia. And then I also thought about the argument that people have, well, everybody should have been armed in that theater. If everyone was armed, then this wouldn't have happened. Well,
I don't want to. Here's the thing. You know what, people? Let's be honest. Most of okay, you're a female. You guys.
Last time I checked,
you guys carry heavy bags. Do you like carrying heavy bags?
Not really.
Okay, so now, from the female perspective, do you want to now carry an AK-47 along with your heavy bag?
Not at all.
Okay, I've downsized my life to a smartphone that the case has all the stuff in there. I don't want to have to carry a gun.
Okay, well,
that's just too much baggage, literally.
All right. Well,
okay?
That's a really great point. The other point is, let's just say that I think it was 25 people in the theater were armed. So this guy stands up, and I'm sure most people did not
friendly fire
immediately know. Thank you. You know where I'm going with this. Most people at the beginning didn't know what was going on. They thought it was fireworks or I don't know, something part of the movie. So they didn't react right away. So some people would have been killed right there. And then let's just say people did stand up and start shooting. What if they shot somebody else in the theater, aiming for the gunman, but hitting somebody else? Because I doubt that we're all going to be expert marksmen, the first time we try and shoot a gun. And when you're in that situation and you're nervous and it's a dark theater, how can you be sure that you're shooting the gunman and not another moviegoer? I don't see how that's reasonable.
Even right off the bat, if 9 people get outgunned, who's the original gunman?
Right.
It's a guessing game.
Yeah. So, really tragic. This is another one of those lone wolf gunmen who criminologists, say these people have like a profile where they're paranoid. They blame everybody else in the world for all the problems. They take no responsibility for any of their own problems. And he alienated his family and lived basically isolated. He had a wife who, divorced him, and a mother who hadn't seen him in a long time, although did give him $5,000 recently because I think he had lost his job. And actually, frightening, this guy had actually gone to law school, which goes to show you, because apparently this guy was intelligent. So which goes to show you that you shouldn't automatically respect somebody just because they graduated from law school.
I don't.
I actually don't know if he graduated, but it is known that he never took the bar exam, but he did run a bar of the alcoholic kind instead. Some people are saying that we need to recognize this as a hate crime against women because 2 women were killed. It seems to me that he hated everybody. So,
yeah, I mean, you would have to kind of question. Okay, Trainwreck is a very female based kind of movie. A lot of that's what was that's who it was marketed to, and so on and so forth. And that's most of who likes it.
Yeah,
I particularly don't. But again, that's beside the point. The point being that yes, it's females who go to see it. So I don't know. Did he choose that movie specifically? I don't know. Did he dislike Amy Schumer? I don't.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think you can draw conclusions from that specifically.
It would have been interesting to know.
I mean, what was he doing in Lafayette anyway?
Who knows?
That still remains open.
Yeah.
It's not even his community. It's not even state.
What would have been interesting to me had he not killed himself and had he been tried was whether this would have sparked a nationwide conversation about should there really be a hate crime against women law, because most states, I actually don't know of any that have hate crimes against women. And we will actually talk about hate crimes in our next story with Dylan Roof, but we will never know. This conversation probably won't be sparked because the gunman killed himself, even though it appears that he had getaway plans. In his hotel room, or motel room, I should say, where he was staying, he had wigs to disguise himself and looked like he was preparing to run away because he had swapped out the license plate on the car that he was driving. So he originally thought he would run away, and I don't know what he thought he would do, but apparently as he saw police closing in, he just shot himself in the head. So now all there is to do is mourn for the two victims, and perhaps consider doing something about who we give guns to. But this transitions well into the Dylan Roof update. So Dylan Roof is the young man who murdered people in the Charleston church. And in the state of South Carolina, there are no hate crime statutes. So Loretta Lynch announced that he was going to be federally indicted on hate crimes for the fact that this was clearly racially motivated and that it obstructed this group's ability to exercise their religious freedom. So I think it is, even though you're like, well, in the state of South Carolina, he's either going to be put to death or given life in prison for the murders that he did commit. Why do we need this federal penalty enhancement? And I think it's important. Number one, because South Carolina as a state doesn't have these kinds of statutes. And so it's important for, I think, the nation, for our sense of justice, to acknowledge that this was racially motivated and religiously motivated, and to make it clear to everybody that crimes against people for a different race or because of their religion is not tolerated
Eventually
in this
gender
country. Yeah. Well, hopefully gender will one day be one of the classifications protected by hate crimes, but it's currently not. But we'll see if the state will try him first or federally first. I have a feeling it'll be the state trying him first. But there is that announcement.
There you go. That's again, the good news is it's moving in as positive direction as it can under the circumstances.
Yeah,
for me.
I mean, it is a big deal for the Attorney General to, the U.S. Attorney to acknowledge the racial undertones, bias, discrimination that were in this case, because there were people, Fox News, who were saying everybody's saying this is racially motivated, and it's so not. Why does everything have to be about race? Well, everything is not about race, but this case was definitely about race, and it's important to acknowledge that. I mean, it is well known by now that Dylann Roof targeted this church because of its historic nature as a black church, and he right before the shooting was seen in photographs holding the Confederate flag, so on and so forth. So the acknowledgement that this is racially motivated, I think, is very important. I don't even think that needs more explanation, but
Fair
hopefully
enough.
that makes sense.
All right. So Bobbi Kristina has
Yeah.
passed away. This we know. That is not the news that we're reporting. The news that we're reporting is that attention is now going to focus on someone else, and it's not her guardians either.
Right.
It is her boyfriend, Nick Gordon. Signs point to the fact that him and Max Lomas, one of his friends, when they called in, finding that Bobbi Kristina was in this tub, there were marks on her.
Yeah.
So it seems very suspicious that who gave her these marks.
Yes, that does. And so prosecutors, or not prosecutors have been investigating, but police have been investigating this for a while now because of those marks that you have mentioned. But those marks by themselves would be very difficult without her testimony to say where they came from, to prove that they were from Nick, and even if they were, that they had anything to do with her death. So instead, what they're going for is an involuntary manslaughter charge against the boyfriend for supplying her with the drugs when he basically knew or should have known that she, had a drug problem and has passed out in bathtubs due to drugs before. Apparently, the same night that her mother died, Bobbi Kristina fell asleep in a bathtub and flooded the hotel room that she was staying in. It's so ironic that that's the same thing that happened to her mother the same night. We in the public did not know that because her PR person had said that she was hospitalized for exhaustion, but the truth now we know is that she was hospitalized because she passed out or fell asleep under the influence of drugs while in the bathtub. So I see what the prosecutors are going for, and how Max Lomas plays into this is he was a friend of theirs who arrived on the scene and who actually found Bobbi Kristina. And Max Lomas is facing 2 federal drug charges, not related to this case, but in the state of Georgia, totally separate issue. But prosecutors are considering asking him to for a deal, that they will reduce the drug charges, perhaps give him probation or something like that, in exchange for him having immunity in the Bobbi Kristina case and for saying what happened that day. What does he know? My personal opinion of this is that even if they get Max Lomas to say what he saw, I doubt he saw Bobbi Kristina take drugs that and he knew where they came from, and that's the part the connection that is not real clear. Is did she get the drugs herself? Did Nick Gordon know that she took the drugs? I mean, there's just, it's a really tenuous connection. There is a connection, but I think it's too tenuous. It's too far stretched to be legally.
Do you think it's bold and it's right to try to, pick at this in that sense, or is just, again, even though it's grasping at straws, is it well intentioned? Is it worth it?
I mean, perhaps it is well intentioned. Anytime a 22-year-old girl dies of unnatural causes, we would like the authorities to look into why it happened. And maybe there's more to the story that I don't know. But given the information that I am seeing, maybe I'm sure prosecutors know more than I do, and maybe it's just the limited information that is available at this time that leads me to that conclusion. Maybe they know more, and maybe there is something to this. Of course, we'll keep everyone posted if there is.
There you go. All right. So Snoop Dogg went to Sweden. He did a performance, and then afterwards he gets arrested for driving while black.
Well, yes, so he says.
So he says.
And actually, he wasn't even driving, which is kind of an interesting part of the story. He was the passenger.
Yeah, and that's the part. So, he's... And that's where the conflicting reports are happening, because from the Swedish authorities, they're saying, he wasn't driving. Snoop Dogg saying he is driving. I don't know who to believe on that. Like, there has to be... We have to come to a conclusion at least on that before we get into why he was fully arrested.
Well, Sweden, I don't know actually if you knew this, I don't know if I really knew this, has a very, very strict no drug policy.
I did. I practiced law in Sweden for 3 years.
He's kidding for everybody that doesn't know. If you're new to the show, welcome. But everybody who's heard the show before knows that Phil is not an attorney. As sophisticated as he sounds, he is not one. But Snoop Dogg thinks he was racially profiled. There's other people that say that maybe he was just celebrity profiled, or maybe because his persona is so much of a marijuana endorser, user. But, I mean, to say that is to assume that the police officer who pulled them over knew it was Snoop in the car.
But regardless, if Sweden, let's say, I don't know how strict they are, but if they have a zero tolerance policy on weed, it doesn't matter. Like, that's beside the point. Yeah, okay, you could say, oh, maybe he was going. No, but regardless, the fact of the matter is that weed is illegal. That's it.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask, well, what did they get pulled over for in the first place? And it was, unsafe lane change or something. It seemed to be pretty benign, nothing major. But I'm wondering why he would get arrested if he was not the driver and drug tested and all that. If he wasn't even driving, if he wasn't even responsible for whatever traffic violation they pulled him over for. But that's looking at this case through the lens of the United States Fourth Amendment, which Sweden doesn't have, and I don't know if they have something that's equivalent to it. Here in the United States, you would not see an officer pull somebody over and then, having no reasonable suspicion, arrest a passenger and test them for drugs.
Well, Snoop Dogg says that the test came back in and that he was clean.
And the Swedish authorities say that the test hasn't come back yet, but it's been a couple of days now. If they really
they said
wanted
2 weeks. I don't know. I read a report that said, I don't know, for some reason they need 2 weeks.
It's the world's slowest drug test.
And maybe they're backed up. I don't know.
Perhaps because they test everybody that's out on the street. Maybe. I don't know. But Snoop says he's not returning there.
Fair enough.
I don't know how upset his Swedish fans are about that.
Apparently they will be.
I am interested to know from our viewers and listeners, do you think he was racially profiled, or, this is Snoop. Of course he's doing drugs and that's why they, arrested him. Or just because he's a celebrity.
Or just because he actually had drugs.
Nobody said that they saw him with drugs.
Okay, well, that he was actually high.
Okay. All right.
I
so-
just think, no offense, like in the spirit of which this is intended, no offense, 90% of the time, I'm sure that you can be like, Snoop Dogg's known for this. So I'm sure, most times that you're going to meet Snoop Dogg, you're going to be like, is he high? At least whether or not he is, the question's going to come up in your mind.
Sure, fair enough. Given his public persona, I'm not surprised.
I mean, hey, this ties into, I know we Bill Cosby wasn't on our official doc, but in that sense, again, we talked about it kind of nonstop in the past couple of weeks, in the court of public opinion, right? Whether or not Snoop Dogg is high all the time is irrelevant, because in his public persona, that's who he is. Someone who is literally high all the time.
And I'm not familiar with Swedish law, but I'm pretty sure that they're not going to convict him of drug use for his public persona. But and I'm
but
sure
it leaves it open to suspicion.
Yeah. And definitely next week, I am sure there will be more on Bill Cosby. There's an amazing, did you see New York Magazine, the cover with all 35 women sitting in chairs, and then they have interviewed each of them, and their stories are strikingly similar. But that will be left for another day. I think we're a little Cosby'd out over here, so we'll give it a break for a week. But I'm almost sure it'll be back next week.
Indeed. And speaking of being back, we'll be back for you guys. That's what we do every week. We deliver legal news. We have some fun with it when we can, and we try to give you guys advice. But the added element is you guys get to participate as well. Anything that we talked about, if you guys have just general questions from a legal perspective, if you guys have your own input, whether legal or not, feel free to comment on this. We talked about Bobbi Kristina. Do you think there is a case to be made there? Is it worthwhile to go after it? Obviously we talked about Snoop Dogg. Was it racial profiling? And everything like that. So there's a lot to comment on, people.
Yeah.
And one of the other things you can comment on, if there isn't a legal news story that we didn't hit, that you guys would like to talk about offline, for in air quotes, because it's obviously online. Anyway, for more direct interaction, Chelsea Galicia, where can the people find you?
At Chelsea Galicia.
And is it Azaria Law for Sarah Azari?
At Azari Law, yes.
Yes, at Azari Law for Sarah Azari, who will be returning.
Same with Mari Fagel.
Yes, at Mari Fagel, and at Your Legal Lady for Mari Fagel. And I'm Phil Svitek, and you can catch us here on BHL's Justice is Served, and check out other shows. Very kind of similar to ours is the Black Tea Party, which takes a political standpoint on various things, and sometimes there's crossover in that way, and we love it because we talk about it from a legal perspective. They talk about it from a politics standpoint. There's This Week, there's The Beat, which is all music, there's Just Saying, there's Reality Check, which is all about reality stars, Fashion 401, no explanation necessary there, and Geek Nerd Tech, which is all about tech news and stuff like that, geeky stuff. So, we'll see you here next time.
From producers Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire BHL crew, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I'm your BHL announcer, Scipio. Instagram me at Planet Scipio. Thank you for tuning in.
Hollywood Redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.